"Gina, it's time for bed. Put that thing away and go brush your teeth." That thing was Gina's phone, the newest Apple model given to her by her mother last month for her 10th birthday, and she was hardly ever without it. Gina looked up at her mom, who was peeking around the bedroom door with contemptuous annoyance. "Mom, you didn't even knock." "My house. I don't have to knock. Now get to bed." Gina looked back down at the phone, head on her pillow and legs stretched long and comfortably on top of the light blue comforter spread smoothly across her bed. She'd recently removed close to a dozen stuffed animals from that same bed, leaving only her 2 favorites. She thought at age 10 she should grow up, at least a little. Only Harry the pink hippo and Ernie the blue elephant remained. Currently, Harry was snuggled under Gina's left arm, helping to keep it in place as she sent a final text message to her best friend, Julie. "Mom sucks. Gotta go. See you tomorrow. Love you." Gina yelled her goodnights down the hall in the general direction of her mother after she finished in the bathroom. She then returned to her bedroom and locked the door, something Crystal, her mother, despised. Gina jumped into bed and tucked herself under the warm sheets. She looked across the room, which was now very dark, with only a small splash of light rising and illuminating from the nightlight in the corner by her bed. The animals may go, but not the nightlight. Never the nightlight, she thought. As she turned over on her side, pulling the covers up for warmth, Gina noticed something on the wall. Her eyes caught only a slight movement or twitch, just as they were beginning to close. Now with her eyes fully open and looking directly at the wall, squinting slightly to see as much detail as possible, Gina quickly realized she was looking at her own outline, her shadow. She stared at the dark shadow for a few moments, mesmerized. The horizontal shape, now perfectly still, was slightly higher on the wall where the covers bulged at her knees and shoulders. Gina continued to stare at this projection of herself, lost in the moment, when... What the? Gina's eyes widened and her body shot straight up. She was now sitting in bed knowing she saw the movement of her shadow. Only she hadn't moved. Her mind quickly told her she must have moved, maybe just a little, but she felt certain that she had been stone still. Realizing she was now getting warmer despite the cool chill that had just moved completely through her, Gina kicked off the sheets and dropped her feet over the side of the bed. She was looking at her shadow on the wall again. It reminded her of a dolphin or maybe a killer whale emerging from the surface of the ocean. She continued to watch, keeping perfectly still, breathing slowly, slowly, slowly. Gina cautiously raised her right hand, only a little. She then lowered and raised it again. The shadow synchronized perfectly. And why shouldn't it? She thought. Gina's heart was beginning to slow and the sweat beginning to dry when she saw the hand rise up very slowly, the hand of the shadow. But her hand was perfectly still. Gina's body froze, except for her heart, which now beat double time, and the small tremble in her hands. She closed her eyes and rubbed her palms over them, thoughts racing quickly in her head, too quickly to grasp anything rational about what she had just witnessed. Or maybe there was nothing rational to grasp. Gina lowered her hands, raised her head slowly, and looked up at the wall. Her shadow, the shadow, was again moving with her in perfect harmony. Deep breaths, Gina said as she continued to stare at the figure on the wall. Gina now wanted nothing more than to jump up, turn on the light, and get out of the room. She desperately needed to regroup, clear her mind, and as much as she hated the thought, maybe even try to convince her mother to let her sleep with her tonight. Gina lowered her feet to the cool wood floor and slowly began to get up from the bed. She wanted to turn her head and make a run for the door, but instead proceeded cautiously, continuing to watch the shadow on the wall follow her every step. She was almost hypnotized by its movement. As Gina got closer to the door, no more than 4 feet now, the shadow seemed to have moved ever so slightly in front of her. It's only the angle of the light, she thought, as she made a lunge for the door. Gina was unsure if it was the position of the nightlight in the opposite corner of the room or something else much more terrifying and incomprehensible. But as her hand grabbed the handle of the door, the shadow's hand did the same thing. Gina instantly felt a sharp jolt throughout her body and jumped back and away from the door. Gina's thoughts were still sharp and coherent, but her body was now frozen in place. She then noticed the shadow on the wall begin to move. Now she was also moving in perfect harmony with it. As the shadow got bigger, she was pulled forward. As the shadow started to shrink, she was pulled from behind. And as the shadow moved back toward the bedroom door, Gina was convinced she was being manipulated like a puppet on a string. At this thought, her body became very light and her head began to swim in a large sea of nausea. Gina's hand was brought forward toward the door. She unlocked it, opened it, and was now moving down the hall while trying desperately to relay signals and instructions to her arms and legs, with no luck. She moved into the living room, noticing her mother asleep on the couch. She tried to talk to her, yell at her, scream at her, but the shadow led her right past her mother and into the kitchen. The shadow continued moving her toward the far end of the kitchen counter. Oh no, Gina thought as she saw the collection of large knives on the counter. Her mind still working perfectly, but her body being fully controlled by something else entirely. She pulled the largest knife from the wooden block and then quickly did an about-face and reversed course, her mind already putting together a few different conclusions, each with its own horrifying ending. Gina felt a burst of pain in her heart as she returned to the living room, and her mind put the final pieces of the puzzle in place. She raised the knife, wanting to speak, but only able to think. "I'm sorry, Mom. I love you so much. Please forgive me." Gina wasn't even able to shed the tears that her heart and soul so desperately wanted to release. She then plunged the knife into her mother's body 18 times. Late the following day, a co-worker found Crystal Holden's mutilated body after she failed to show up for work. The initial crime scene investigation revealed a missing knife from the kitchen that investigators believe may have been used as the murder weapon. They are still looking for the knife, however, along with 10-year-old Gina Holden, who wasn't found in the home. The end.